1.
Good evening, all. Welcome to the second panel discussion on handling stress during the times of COVID-19. So this is an initiative by the Wellness Center of the Indian Institute of Science. During this pandemic, many people are having different kinds of problems, so we need to address these issues. So that is the idea behind these panel discussions. And this will be continued for 2 more months. So we will have 4 more such panel discussions addressing different aspects. In addition, every day evening from Monday to Friday, we have the yoga with Dr. Omkar. He's a member of the Wellness Center. So there's a live event between 6 and 6:30 p.m. every day. So today, the moderator for this event is Professor Vishwesha Guttal. He's a member of the Wellness Center and a faculty member from the Center for Ecological Sciences. We have four very distinguished panelists today to discuss different aspects. Over to you, Vishwesh.
Thank you very much, Professor Anil Kumar, and I welcome all the attendees today for a very important panel discussion on stress management during the times of COVID. And I hope you will all find it very helpful as well. And it is my great honor and pleasure to introduce the four panelists today. Let me begin by introducing Dr. Ajit Bhide. Dr. Ajit Bhide is the head of psychiatry at St. Martha's Hospital in Bengaluru, and he's also been practicing privately for a fairly long time. He has served as a faculty at St. John's Medical College, NIMHANS, and he was also the past president of the Indian Psychiatric Society, and he's also the founder president of Indian Association of Private Psychiatry, Karnataka chapter. And I would really like to emphasize and inform you all that Dr. Ajit Bhide has been instrumental in us setting up the IASC Wellness Center, and he is also a member of our advisory board. And it's my great pleasure to introduce and welcome Dr. Ajit Bhide.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Our second panelist today is Professor Sunita Simon Kurpad, who has done MBBS and DNB from St. John's Medical College, and she has done MRC Psychiatry from Cambridge University, UK. She has been working as a faculty member at St. John's for more than 25 years now, and she is currently the professor at the Department of Psychiatry and the professor and head of Department of Medical Ethics. She is actively involved in many activities and including areas of clinical work, teaching, and research. And it's once again a great pleasure that we have Sunita Simon joining as a panelist today. Welcome, Sunita Simon.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Our next distinguished panelist today is Dr. Amrit Pattojoshi. He is a very well-known psychiatrist based in Odisha. He is a neuropsychiatrist, psychotherapist, and a wellness consultant. He is currently the professor and chief consultant psychiatrist at High Tech Medical College, AMRI Hospital, and Healing Touch Clinic. He is the chief coordinator of UNICEF, WHO, and IPS initiative on telemedicine on psychosocial management during COVID-19. He also edits the Odisha Journal of Psychiatry. It's really a great honor and pleasure that you are able to join us from Odisha. Thank you very much, and on behalf of IASC, I welcome you to the event.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Our fourth panelist is Dr. Naren P. Rao, who might be familiar with many of you here. Dr. Naren is currently an additional professor at the Department of Psychiatry in NIMHANS, and many of you are probably aware that he was a faculty member at the Center for Neuroscience at IASC. He has a wide range of experience in research in psychiatry. He specializes in the areas of neuroimaging, use of yoga and mental disorders, and he has won many awards as well, including DBT Awards, Canada Hope Fellowship, and so on. And he is also a member of our external advisory board at the IAC Wellness Center, and he actively participates in all of our discussions and provides very valuable inputs. And he's again here with us today on our panel today. Welcome, Dr. Naren Rao. Thank you, Naren. With that short note of introduction, without further delays, I would like to invite Dr. Ajit Bhide to provide a keynote address. The way we have structured the discussion today is that we will have a short presentation by Dr. Ajit Bhide on stress management. This will be followed by a couple of short remarks from each of the panelists, and then we take questions from that we have received over our form that we had sent and circulated during the announcement of this event. And there is also an option to send questions via live event Q&A. So you can send these questions either anonymously or with your name, entirely up to you. And we will go through those questions as well, depending on the availability of time. I do expect that we will be able to go through many of your questions, and we hope that this session will be very helpful to all of the IAC community. With that note, over to you, Dr. Bhide.
Thank you, Vishu. First of all, I must thank Professor Anil and Vishu, as well as other members of the Wellness Center for having this session. Now, you start your TV news and you are bombarded with news about COVID all the time. I know this can get very tiring, and we are adding to the burden today by taking up this topic, but I think it's very timely, and I noticed that a number of people, including from the Institute, are seeking advice about the various stresses that have come into our lives along with this pandemic. So what makes this time so stressful? All of us have certain fears, anxiety, fears about an infection that can indeed turn quite deadly. Even as I speak to you, I'm still recovering from the shock of learning that one of my immediate junior colleagues from Vizag, whom I was very fond of, has passed on thanks to the infection. There is fear about one's safety and also the fear of the safety of our dear ones. We also, at least I do, and I'm sure many others do, face this issue of anger. Anger is coupled with anxiety, and this anger and anxiety are caused by people whom we see not complying with the safety measures, which themselves are not a complete guarantee of preventing the infection, are pretty good measures anyway. But people refuse to comply them. I see educated people on the street in front of my house not wearing masks, people in shopping areas and malls not abiding by the physical distance rules that have been suggested. And this is very disheartening. Then again, we are stressed out by the fact that we have monotony. At one level, the work from home option was a great blessing. People didn't have to negotiate traffic, though traffic itself has now come to a much minuscule proportion of what it used to be. But work from home has now become a stress by itself. Why? Because it's completely monotonous. The other aspect of monotony is that we are seeing the same faces all the time, 24/7 within the family. We are in each other's face. The measures that were advocated to try and restrict the infection, that is physical distancing, sometimes called social distancing, and I think I prefer the term physical distancing, though there is a certain degree of social distancing as well. This again isolates us from the rest of the world, and that is not a small stress by itself. On account of our being confined to the houses, of course now the lockdown has been lifted in very many places except in containment areas, our normal biological rhythms, our appetite, our eating behavior, sleep patterns, sleeping hours, our ability to participate in intimate life, those who have a partner, and excretory functions. All these become altered because we are now in a somewhat restricted and, in a sense, artificial environment compared to what we were used to. Then again, we know that a lot of jobs have been stopped. People have been thrown out of jobs. People have been curtailed, sometimes even without the pink slip. There are financial crises occurring in various people's lives. Those of you who have retained your jobs are very, very lucky to do so. And in the Institute, I know that everybody has retained their job. But this has brought a lot of stress into other lives. So that maybe even if you are secure in your job or your studentship, but there are others close to you who might have suffered these crises. And in a sort of carryover fashion, you're in the hinterland and you also face the consequences if your parent or your seniors at home have faced this. There are health problems, especially chronic physical illnesses cannot get the kind of attention they need. Diabetics and heart patients and hypertensives need regular follow-up. This cannot be brought about. Even acute physical illness may not get the kind of attention it deserves because the health sector are completely preoccupied with looking after COVID. Then we have another aspect of health, that is pre-existing mental illness, and these pre-existing mental illness can get indeed aggravated. Also, some of our habits get aggravated. We also cultivate new habits. There are changes in the eating patterns. People tend to medicate themselves to get over the crisis, so there's falling back on alcohol and tobacco. A lot of us who did not have this problem earlier are now depending more and more on the web and getting addicted to the various facets of the web. People who had not been gaming enjoyed it as a diversion to begin with, but now they got addicted to gaming. Also, people who were not onto pornography, or those who were in a smaller measure, have got addicted to pornography as one means of substituting healthy intimacy. Then again, because of this stressful time, we are deprived of exercise. Many people don't like the idea of confining yourselves to the walls of your house and exercising within, because they must have their morning walk or trip to the gym. Entertainment has been restricted. And of course, we are deprived of even fresh air and sunshine. All this brings stress by itself. Then there are kids issues. All our children, especially those in school-going age, there are online classes. Within one house, you have two children, and if you have both parents working, you need to have 4 devices. You need to have adequate privacy and silence for each of these. We need adequate space, and many houses don't have that kind of space because sometimes the timings clash. Many people, and I know one of our faculty herself is having this issue with crucial junctures in your education, and people are transiting in their education, and this brings stress by itself. And coupled with this is difficulties in exam scheduling at various stages, right from your primary school up to your school leaving stage. Exams cannot be held on schedule. Sometimes the exam rules are changed. Sometimes only the internal assessment is taken as the final marks, and that is not entirely fair. But fairness is something that does not attend on most biological phenomena, and we have to cope with it nevertheless. If we speak of mental morbidity, pre-existing mental illness or mental morbidity, even if it is fully recovered or remitted, it tends to get aggravated during this time. If there is a family history of a pre-existing mental illness, then you might become more prone if you have such a illness in somebody blood related to you particularly. And the mental morbidity increases when we are already in a state of some degree of isolation. So if there's a lack of good social support, then mental morbidity tends to increase in the face of stresses like this pandemic. Adverse socioeconomic circumstances, lower household incomes, having children, especially small children at home, having an infected member in the family, and quarantine-related issues, all these lead to a greater chance of mental morbidity occurring in the background of the pandemic. Now, who is more prone to have a sort of breakdown under these circumstances? People who are at high risk. We know that the elderly, especially those above 60 years of age, those who have pre-existing illnesses like diabetes and heart disease and hypertension, and now very recently they say obesity is also something that renders you more prone to breakdown under stress. Then again, younger persons, especially children and teens. I recently learned from my pediatrician friend that somebody as young as 10 days old has also developed the symptoms of COVID. People caring for family members and loved ones, especially dependent family members, they are under a lot of stress as it is, and now the caregiving has become compounded by the pandemic, and they are likely to have breakdown. Frontline COVID warriors, and I mean especially medical and paramedical staff, who are exposing themselves to this risk, they are continuously on tenterhooks, and even the strongest of personalities sometimes can have a breakdown. People with hypersensitive personalities, those who are highly strung, and those who have pre-existing mental illness, which we mentioned a little while ago, they are more prone to breakdowns. Persons who have lost their jobs face major employment changes, not necessarily losing their jobs, but being virtually relocated to another project, virtually have forced to change teams because the overall employment has shrunk within the organization. All these changes are stressful and can be markers for a breakdown. People who have marked disabilities, including intellectual disability, what we previously used to call mental retardation, are much more prone to breakdown because they live in an uncertain world as it is. People who are socially isolated, even before the pandemic, and those who are homeless, they are very prone to breakdowns. People who are easily swayed, especially victims of fake news, people who are given to spreading gossip, subconsciously very, very commonly, and people who lack authentic information in their primary language, they can have breakdowns much more easily. Also, it has been seen that people from minorities, both racial and ethnic minorities, seem to be more prone to stress-related crises. There are 4 Ds that attend on this scourge: dread, despondency, distress, and unfortunately even death. So we have to watch out for these and tackle them at different stages. There's nothing you can do about death, of course, beyond trying to prevent it. When I made a presentation about this to a team of medical personnel, a very senior pharmacist countered my 4 Ds, and I must thank Mr. Ishwaran that he came up with these 4. Now, sorry if this sounds like your model science class from way back in school, but he said, what about devotion, dedication, discipline, and duty? Now, if you have a sense of dedication to your work, if you have a sense of devotion about what you're doing in your life generally and at your workplace and family in particular, if you can lead a reasonably disciplined life and the sense of duty guides you through life, then I think you're on a good track. But this is a rather tall order for somebody mortal like me. So on today's menu, we have different types of stresses. We've invited Professor Sunita Simon-Kurpad from St. John's to speak to us about or answer questions about stress related to family, marriage. These are not minor areas. We know that marital stress goes up when, like I said, you're 24/7 in each other's face. Dr. Narain Rao, homegrown boy, will address stress at the workplace and financial stresses. My friend Amrit Pattajoshi, by the way, Amrit was to be with us at the college mental health program, which we had in January with under the aegis of the Wellness Center with the Task Force on College Mental Health of the Indian Psychiatric Society. Some personal contingencies deprived of Amrit's presence at that time, but I'm very glad he's here today. And he will be addressing the entire spectrum of direct health-related issues, including mental health and COVID-19 per se. And anything that's left over, I'm there for you. I will try and cover. Of course, our divisions over here are not watertight. They're not borders that cannot be crossed. We're not entirely into pigeonholes. And we might contribute to each other's areas as well. With this little introduction and a small presentation that alerts us to what the stresses are, I have not concentrated on the topic itself, which I believe will come up in the panel discussion, that is handling the stresses that we've mentioned. So, one of my favorite comic characters, and this has become a sort of an ongoing series now, Snoopy the dog and Charlie Brown the character have these exchanges. So someday we will all die, Snoopy, says Charlie Brown, to which very correctly Snoopy responds, true, but on all other days we will not die. So thank you for being here and for listening. I concluded my last presentation to you people, and this is my keynote all the time. There is power in positivity. And I like to quote the British author C.S. Lewis, who says, You can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are. You can start where you are and change the ending. In other words, we need to have proactive attitudes and measures to get us going in the right path. Thank you very much for your patient listening. And thank you, Anil, Vishal, Arun, for letting me make this presentation. Over to you, Vishal.
Muted.
Okay, thank you, Professor Bhide, for that really nice presentation. So I would now request all the panelists to make a few remarks. Let me start with Professor Sunita Simon.
Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. I think what was planned for us, if I'm right, is to talk for a minute or so on what we personally found stressful during the COVID time. Am I right?
Yeah.
That is what you'd like us to talk about. So what I thought I would briefly tell you about what I found stressful, though there've been a few negatives. Strangely, there've been some positives also during this COVID time, but I won't go into that right now. Maybe later, if somebody would like to know about that, we can discuss it. I think probably for me, what was most stressful at the onset in March when this saga started was really confronting the issue of my mortality, and that too from my workplace, in the sense that as a psychiatrist, we understood that the mortality rate among psychiatrists across the world was something like 3%, which is, and the mortality was really because we spend more time talking to patients, and a lot of patients can be asymptomatic and carriers. So that was something that was personally worrying for me, because St. John's, we never stopped OPD. We continued to see patients, though the numbers were little less. So that was anxiety provoking. But I suppose one way to handle it, which was I felt there's nothing I could do per se about the COVID other than mask and hand washing. That time, we didn't have the PPEs, but really to do what I could do about one risk factor, which was my weight. So I made sure that I started eating a little more sensibly. I've always been active, and I go for my walks and things like that. But I made sure I slept better and do what I could in terms of handling my weight. That was at least something I had control over. So that was one stress about dealing with mortality. That's it from my side. I think my minute is over.
Thank you very much, Professor Sunita Simon. And I would now like to request Dr. Amrit Bhattajoshi to have
Thank you. Good evening, respected seniors and my friends. So as Dr. Bhide had clearly outlined, these outbreaks of this pandemic can be very stressful, and they can include fear and worry about our own health and the health of our own loved ones, maybe parents, children, our close people. We might, our own existing mental health issues might get aggravated in terms of, if somebody is anxious, he might become more anxious, somebody might become more depressed. There'll be change in the eating, sleeping pattern. Somebody might eat more, somebody is sleeping more. The patterns of sleeping is increasingly changing. We're unable to focus on our work, unable to concentrate on whatever task is being given to us. There might be worsening of chronic health problems in terms of diabetes, in terms of asthma, in terms of COPD or maybe hypertension. We might tend to use a lot of alcohol, tobacco, or other drugs. We are concerned, and maybe we need coping skills to manage and maintain the social distancing or the physical distancing, whatever you might like to put it as. Sharing our own fears and apprehensions. Do we have a medium to share our fears and apprehensions? Our home life is disrupted. Our routines are disrupted. We used to go to the gym. We used to go to the movie halls. Everything is gone. Fear of contamination. Even if we go out, bring some grocery back, we're always fearful that are we getting some germs inside it, some virus inside, contaminating others. The impact of the information, so much of negative information, such a large amount of information coming to us, how we handle it, how we process it, and how we actually know what is right, what is wrong. The whole system is fluctuating, the rules are fluctuating. Today contaminate, tomorrow quarantine rules are changing. Everything is in a flux, nothing is constant. Microaggression, towards medical professionals, towards somebody who is having an illness, as if somebody has done a murder and come back. You know, loss of self-care activities, you know, how to cope, how to manage these things. You know, we start asking ourselves, what is the basis of life? The question, the whole existential question: why am I? What am I? So I think we as mental health professionals are very, very important in maybe understanding, in accepting, and maybe trying to help people out in managing these things. Thank you, sir. I think my 2 minutes over.
Thank you very much, Dr. Amrit. I would now like to request Dr. Naren. Dr. Naren Rao. Can you switch on your video, please?
It's on.
Okay.
Can't see. I will switch it on again.
Yeah.
Am I visible? Okay, I just switched on off. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Ishu. Yeah. Initially, what was more stressful to me was the fear that I may infect someone else at home. Okay. So, and the second thing was we and my wife both being doctors. If both get infected, who will take care of rest at home? So that was the initial worry. But as the time passed and this worry got settled, the next main thing was work related. So there are deadlines which don't wait for the COVID. So the project's getting over, the student's thesis has to get over, but the research cannot continue. So I'm sure many in IASC also share the same feelings that the funding agency is not listening to COVID. So you have deadlines. So meeting deadlines was the major stress on the work front because things are not in your control. Things are out of control. So how do we accept that whatever we aimed and worked for years cannot be just completed? Then came the question of financial issues of many others who were dependent on me, not on a personal front, but on a professional front. So people who work with me, some of them lost jobs, some of them are worried that whether they will get job again or not, consuming them. So I think COVID has posed and challenged each one of us in different way, and also in all domains, not only in a single domain. So maintaining this balance and at the same time continuing hoping for the next has been the main challenge. So one thing which worked for me is I made a small group of my friends who also had their parents and then others who all had the similar problem. So I think the peer group is one which helped. And the second thing was sometimes it's better to accept what can be changed and what cannot be changed, and then hope for the best and wait and pass through that. So this too shall pass has been what is helping me. So yeah, I think that's my 2 minutes of my personal experience with COVID.
Yeah, I would like to thank all the panelists for sharing their perspectives and their own, management of stress. I think many of them will resonate to us as well, right? I can directly relate to what Dr. Naren was saying about, it wasn't really about for many as many of us who know about COVID know by now, younger population are really not at risk as much as the elder ones are. So if we are staying with parents and so on, we get stressed that we might pass on to them. That was one of my own worries when I was staying with my parents during the time of initial lockdown phases, and of course managing kids is of course really challenging for many of us. So with that note, we have received a whole bunch of questions, and we have also received a couple of questions over the chat box here. So let us start with maybe questions that relate to domestic issues, marital and domestic issues, because we have received quite a few of them here. So I would like to, many of these will be addressed by Professor Sunita Simon, but I also welcome other panelists to pitch in whenever they would like to. Just give me a shout and I will hand over to you. So let me read out the first question here. So I'm finding it difficult to take care emotionally of my 65-year-old mother who has dementia. Lot of guilt arises that I should be spending more time with her, but I feel drained of all energy in interacting with her. There is no help, so all the housework needs to be done, along with taking care of an 80-year-old child. Plus, working from home, which is not happening much, as I get physically drained and cannot mentally concentrate on my job, requires concentration. A lot of emotional turmoil is going on that prevents me from working efficiently, and my spouse's stress is also falling on me. So this is the first question that we have received about the domestic issue. Managing a old and not well parent, as well as the managing the family.
I think that's a very difficult question. I mean, I think obviously the stress is there, and that is why this young person has flagged this issue, and it's obviously something that is difficult to cope with. Some thoughts which came to my mind is, I think, as Naren said earlier, it is good to look at things as what I can do something about and what I cannot do something about. And I think it looks as if there's a lot on her plate, and I don't think she can do more. So definitely there is no reason to feel guilt that you're not doing more for your mother, because you're doing your best. This is somebody with dementia, and you cannot do things to the perfect high standard that you normally do. And I think that is something you need to make your peace with. This is an unusual pandemic time. Often we find a lot of us who do many things, we like to do things to a certain standard. But I think you have to, it is absolutely fine to reset that standard a little lower, so long as everyone is physically safe. You don't have to worry that you have to do everything perfectly. The other thing is, if it is possible, it is important to try and delegate some things. I think sometimes we don't ask enough of our spouses. And if your spouse is there in the picture, it is important to communicate, not when you're tired, and because sometimes at least I know from my own experience, sometimes when we're tired, we tend to use more adjectives than we need to, and that can be counterproductive. So, you just need to state what the issues are and look, can you please help? And, start with tasks which is, possible. And I think you need to delegate that, and especially childcare. That is something, the husband, whether it's, playing something together, or, in an ideal time, so long as your child is not addicted to TV, it's fine if both father and son, are watching, or father and daughter, the child are watching TV or something, together. And I think it is important to, take time out for yourself to recharge. If you're feeling tired and drained out, definitely you're doing too much. And one simple thing, which is easier said than done, because often when I tell people this, they say, I really don't have the time. But you have to make sure you're sleeping enough. And a lot of people, when they have a lot to do, the first thing they compromise on, especially women, is cutting down on sleep. So somehow you need to make sure you sleep adequately. And where you can, do less. I mean, of course, we can't order out too much in this COVID time because of the risks there. But if everyone needs to have salads for a meal and fruit, you don't have to cook, to your usual high standard. I mean, at my home, I've coped with this by ensuring my husband cooks, and he's a good cook, so that helps. So, I mean, that's what I'd say. It's a difficult situation, so you're doing your best. Don't feel guilty that you're not doing more, and do try and delegate some of what you can. That's what I'd say.
Thank you very much. There's actually a question that is sort of related. I will read it out and read that out anyway. This is from a postdoctoral fellow in IISc. He or she says that I went back to home post lockdown and had to stay at home for almost 3 months due to the nationwide lockdown. I never stayed so long at home at a stretch before, and hence my parents became quite dependent on me during these months. But I had to come back to resume my work as my tenure is short, and following that, my mother had a serious setback. On top of that, although I came back more than a month ago, I'm unable to go to the department due to increasing number of cases on campus. I know my work is more lab oriented than theory or PC based, therefore I'm unable to work properly. So basically this person is drained out on both fronts. I'm unable to help my parents At the same time, I'm unable to get my work done either. We advise others to stay positive, but how can we stay positive when nothing productive is going around us?
Is that to me or Naren?
Yeah. I mean, I think it would be great if you can take, and we can of course get more comments as well.
About the issue at home front, because parents are away, and I mean the person has had to come back. I think again there's no easy answer. But if the parents, it was an issue of emotional need, that emotional closeness that the parents got used to, is to try and ensure. I'm sure this person is doing it to be on on call with them, or phone them every day to be in touch. And if there's any possibility to access neighbors to also give that physical help, and maybe it's useful to ask the mother what exactly she is anxious about. And for a lot of parents, the anxiety has been that if something happens to me, who's going to take me to hospital? And people hear horror stories about what happens in hospital. So it may be useful if parents are getting anxious and dependent to talk to them and list it out from them as to what are the issues you're worried about. And again, some of the things, I ensure that neighbors and people help out, because one thing which we really see now is communities getting together and really supporting each other. So that is a positive. The work aspect, I hand over to Naren.
Yeah, sure. I think this is one of the problem which I'm sure majority in IASA will be facing, that the productivity is hampered. And it's not only IASA, anybody who has been super productive earlier and suddenly you have a hiatus of 3-4 months is going to face this problem. I have been thinking of an analogy that imagine you are in a cyclone, and when there is a storm, people who are on the top of the trees are the worst affected. Those who are on the ground are the less affected. So if you want to be on the top of the ladder at all the time, during the emotional storm like this, it is going to affect you. So my suggestion is, I think we need to be grounded. We need to make our roots strong, both emotionally and physically, so that we will be able to withstand the storm. Because if our roots are not strong and we are worried only about the productivity, then we are likely to be affected more. So my thing is, I think we need to prioritize and then schedule things properly. So many times what we tend to do is we need to prioritize what is there on our schedule, but sometimes we may also have to schedule our priorities. Otherwise, when there is a demand from your work, your personal priorities may not be on the schedule at all. So I think instead of prioritizing the schedule, it is very important to schedule the priorities and then start working based on that. And the last thing is, what I feel is, if you are not productive for a couple of months, just wait for and strengthen your what is the basics that you need to be strengthened. I'm sure in your technical field, everybody will have some lacunae, so you can use this time to strengthen that. If you are not allowed to go to the lab, there is nothing much you can do. For safety reasons, if you are not allowed to go to the lab, and if your career is primarily the field is lab based, there will be definitely many other things that you could do in other places. I think you need to refocus and then engage yourself in other activities which may not have been considered as productive by you before the COVID time. So I think if we are able to do that, then you will be able to strike some kind of a balance and peace, so that you will be able to take up the rest of the challenges once the COVID settles down. You are mute, Vishwesha.
Yeah, I think it was a very useful comment, Naren, especially on learning skills that we otherwise ignore. I think, that's something we do sort of encourage our students to do all the time. But this is a time, catching up on literature reviews, maybe writing a review article, catching up on communication, writing skills that you may not have been very strong right now. Then again, these things one can discuss with their supervisor and get feedback. What are the areas to sort of strengthen while the lab work cannot go on? I think is actually a very useful suggestion to think about and move on and make use of the best that what of these times, the very difficult times. So let me now go to a couple of other questions, related questions. So it says, one person says, a member of the family is under work pressure and is stuck at home due to corona and is highly agitated and is taking out stress on the rest of family members. How do we cope? And there is a related question that has come via live event Q&A. My parents have unresolved issues amongst themselves, which they're not open to resolve just every now and then. They fight about it. It's not like normal household fights. It gets very ugly and is impacting my mental health. At times, it even makes me take extreme measures as I'm unable to perform well with my research because of these things. My mind is completely cluttered with these thoughts, and it takes a week or more to get over these issues. What can I do to calm myself? So I will again request Professor Sunita Simon to address these two related issues. The first one was an agitated family member, and the second one is that of parental conflicts affecting the student.
Yeah. So regarding the first one about work pressure and the person is agitated and taking it out on the rest of the family, I think once I did hear this line that you really cannot change something that you tolerate. So if the issue is with another person who's not handling the stress well and putting it on others, it is important to find time to try and sit down and communicate to them and say that talk to them about it and try and get them to address it. Now, they've not mentioned the gender of the person, but sometimes I've seen women are a little better. I don't mean this as a sexist remark, but women are generally better about communicating their distress and eliciting help from others. When men are upset, they get angry, and that effectively, puts somebody who wants to help them, it puts them off. So if you find someone is under stress and irritable, it is good to talk to them about it. And if they're willing to get help, whether they need counseling help or because a lot of the issues that we discussed in COVID times, you just have to be okay with doing less, being less productive, and being okay with that, and try to use your time to learn other skills, cooking, helping. There are a lot of other things that can be done. So you do need to help that person find a solution and not tolerate it. If you don't communicate that this is not okay, it's going to continue. So the related thing about the young person whose parents are having difficulties, I would have said that ask them to get help, or online counseling, telecounseling is available. But he's made it very clear. The person has made it very clear that parents are not open to it. So if parents are unwilling, then in some ways, the only thing I can think of is to create some kind of psychological boundary. I mean, be there for the parents to help and support them, but to try and have some kind of space and time for himself and not get drawn into it. And he's not responsible for his parents. And maybe sometimes he has to be open to the fact that maybe he can't really help them. One line worried me, that he said that sometimes I feel like taking extreme measures. But if it is thoughts about hurting himself or herself, then I think this may be a good time to access counseling help for oneself. One may not be able to access help for parents, but what can you do to help yourself? I mean, some things like making sure that you have time to relax, or enjoy TV or Netflix, or those things are important to distract yourself and try and feel good about what little you can feel good about. But bottom line, you're not responsible for your parents if they're not willing for help. And again, when they're both angry, it's not a time you can ask them to go in for counseling. But when they're a little calmer, you could try and ask them. At least both may not be equally angry and upset. There may be one person who's a little more open to it, and see whether they'll access counseling help. That's for me.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And there's another. This is one of the last questions on the marital domestic issues. This is a person with a child. My 7.5-year-old son's behavior seems to be changing. He is doing things to please his father for the fear of father's scolding, or getting angry at him, or losing father's affection. I feel there is a lot of internal stress in him. How can I help the child?
Um, Actually, one of the things which came to mind when I saw this question was that I think it is important as I'm presuming it's it's obviously the mother, because she said that the child is doing things to please the dad, and the mother's instincts are important. But I did not really get why she felt him trying to please the father or avoid his scolding was a problem, unless the child was doing something extreme, something which was not okay to please the dad. But generally, I would have thought if you're doing things to make one of your parents happy or to avoid their scolding is okay. But I presume as a mother, she must have felt that the child is not taking care of own needs, or something like that. Then again, the child is 7.5, so I presume like second standard. And at that level, it is possible to, even if you play with the child, either make believe and other things, sometimes the children will communicate what they're distressed about. So I don't personally think, unless there is a major problem with the behavior, trying to please dad is particularly a bad thing. But I think there's something there which is concerning the mother, so I would not ignore that. But in what way has the child's behavior changed? If the child is generally eating okay, sleeping okay, or having fun, and doing things, that should be quite fine. Dr. Ajit, does anyone else have a comment on that? Because
I invite comments on anybody else on any of these issues, including the latest one. Does anyone want to go? Dr. Bide, Dr. Ramit?
No, I think this is a very complete answer. So I think not getting too preoccupied with the child's own stresses helps you to de-stress them too. Because if you get stressed out by these situations, then you cannot help others. So first take it coolly. I think I agree with everything Sunita had to say about the particular way of handling it and a sense of detachment.
Okay. Any other comments on general issues, questions you have received on domestic issues?
I think we may come back to that, but I think we should have a little variation in the themes.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So, so we now have some questions that are generic, sort of pandemic related issues. So first question is how to be mindful and focused in this pandemic. So I'm trying to pose these questions to Dr. Amrit, if it's okay. And with the uncertainty of everything around us, how to see the point of doing a research, especially on subjects which are of no direct use right now.
Yeah. So we have to differentiate between whether our mind is full or we become mindful. Now what is happening is our mind is full of lot of, like Dr. Bide was talking about, only Corona, COVID. So somewhere what happens is our mind is absolutely full with a lot of stresses. So in mindfulness, we have to concentrate on ourselves now, not on the thoughts. So the best way is to just be at peace with ourselves, take out a space, me time, maybe 10 to 15 minutes, a place where there is no sound, no disturbances in terms of, and then try to concentrate. Stray thoughts will come in, accept those thoughts. Don't fight those thoughts always. Don't take it as a negative thing. These will come out, they'll come in, and let them, like I do a policy of let it come in, let it go out. And then try to concentrate on the other nuances of life, maybe your breathing, maybe your touch, maybe your, basic things we can always do, like we just step out on the balcony and then just try to feel the light, the sunlight, maybe hear the birds chirping in, those things we are missing in life. Maybe take a coffee, just keep the drink for maybe 5 seconds more, get the taste, get the smell. So somewhere we are not concentrating on the negative thoughts that actually pull us down or maybe make us much more stressed. So that is how we can, as a basic level, practice mindfulness. Coming to research, like we have been discussing a lot of things about research, here we were thinking about how to exist, how to be alive, how to come out not being injured. Like we have problems in getting a bed, we have problems in getting proper treatment. So somewhere the focus We have to concentrate on the now principle. Research is for something for the future, and research has a lot of meaning to it. At this point of time, maybe today the research is not of a great importance. Maybe tomorrow, maybe after 5 days, those things are going to help us. Like if now we are thinking like if we had done research on corona maybe 5 years back, this thing would not have been come. Like we are running after a vaccine, we are running after some corona vaccine somebody is talking about. We are thinking that August 15th will be the Independence Day for us, where we will be getting rid of corona. So somewhere these research might help us in the long-term basis. But today, let us concentrate on being alive, on being happy, on doing things for others, and at the same time, let us concentrate on our professional life or whatever is happening. That's all I would like to talk about the research part. Anybody else can add things?
I think the usefulness of research. Vishu, may I? Vishu?
Yes, please. Yes, I'm just putting this.
So I think it's a very insightful comment, and I think the government also periodically asks this question of premier institutes like yours. All this research you're doing, how useful is it? I remember when Ms. Irani was the HRD minister, that was her major concern. How useful is what you're doing? But I think an institute like yours does research that eventually becomes useful. It doesn't necessarily set out with a paradigm of necessarily doing stuff that is going to help you control pollution or help you control traffic or help you control disease. Fundamental science research involves inputs that many of which may not have immediate social application. But I think these existential questions should not come up at this stage, though you might govern your own principles thereafter to say that I'm going to do stuff that is only useful to society in the long run. Right now, what research you're involved in, be devoted to it. I know that a lot of field work has been restricted because of the social restrictions that are imposed on us that cannot be helped. But otherwise, this is the time, like somebody, I think Naren said, or was it you, Vishu, that spend time to do your literature review, spend time to understand more of your field, update yourself on both existing research as well as skills. And I think that time can be usefully spent in that context.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bide. So let me take up a few more questions. There are more work-related questions as it happens, and there are also more questions on issues associated with the pandemic itself. So one question is, how do I shield myself from constant put downs and criticisms and you're fit for nothing kind of comments? So how, and I think this might be a issue that many students do face when they don't have a good collegial understanding with their advisors. So can anybody take this question? Can Dr. Bide address this question?
Yeah, I think this is a very toxic kind of comment that pervades, especially highfalutin institutes of people in very. There is an old Sanskrit saying which says that when one lotus shines in a pond, but your lotus full of in a pond full of lotuses, how will any lotus particularly shine? So this happens in IISc quite commonly. They come as toppers from their respective colleges and universities and land up in your place, and suddenly they have to share the limelight with so many. The special treatment they got in their mother places does not obtain over here. Now, the kind of comment that comes, they think you're useless, is something that needs to be discouraged in a very definitive way. That these kind of comments are not to be entertained at all. And I think this should be carried to higher authorities who should then engage in some kind of discourse with the people making such comments. There are lots of people from your institute who have variations on this theme. They see many of us mental health professionals privately, and they are very hurt by this to the point of even turning suicidal. I've encountered this not more than once. And I think what we need to do is rise above this and say that you are no one to pass judgment on me. Easy to say, not easy to do, but not impossible to do either. To say that I will decide my value. The unfortunate thing is that sometimes faculty encourage these kind of comments. And faculty should have something of a parental attitude also, especially with your undergraduate students, to take them aside and say that, listen, you're not performing up to the mark. You were selected for this course in this institute. Why aren't you measuring up? That kind of a personal counseling, a personal ventilation to be permitted will help a lot in reducing the trauma of these kind of horrible remarks. And I know that many faculty do engage in this kind of mentoring that is very necessary. Mentoring doesn't only mean promoting talented people upwards, but also looking after day-to-day crises that arise in young people's lives.
Thank you very much. So there's another question.
Vishu, you stop thanking us. We're all with you, because every time you have to say a thank you formally.
Okay, so I won't thank you this time. There is another question which maybe Dr. Ramrit Bhattajoshi can take. One is, a lack of motivation to work. So this person who has asked the question is saying, I lack the motivation to do work. After exploring nihilism, nothing motivates me to make bigger goals. There is some equation this person has written down. If Homo sapiens is equal to some combination of nature and nurture, if I take out the nurture from the equation, what are the universal desires in Homo sapiens? I'm a confused individual. I try to follow chimp behavior by watching chimpanzee documentaries. I hate socioeconomic inequalities in life and find comfort by giving higher values to death, disease, aging, and other universal sufferings. Can you list me some universal desires so I motivate myself to be motivate myself based on those desires?
Like it's a beautiful question. Little difficult.
You have suddenly there is dark. Your screen has become dark. You're not visible.
Am I audible?
You're audible though.
So basically, there is a power cut and the inverter maybe has tripped. Okay, 3 hours power cut has been going on. So I think somewhere the inverter is tripped. I'm sorry. I'll just call somebody and put on the emergency lights. Till then, I can answer the question. Yeah. So there is darkness everywhere. The question was a little dark, and then I'll just quote something by that the absence of meaning seems to be some sort of meaning of life. That is the basic concept. If you look at nihilism, the very fact that we are asking and he's asking that give me some reasons to exist means that it is not as nihilistic as he made it out to be. So the person who is asking the question is also in search of a motivation to do things. Like everybody is depressed, everybody is anxious, everybody is stressed out in this moment. Somewhere we have to look at the positives in life. Like the question, the person who asked the question is asking about what all I can find in terms of desires. It might be knowledge. If you are looking at a place like Indian Institute of Science, it can be knowledge. It might be knowledge giving you power. It might be, societal acceptance in terms of doing something good. It might be status. It might be love. It might be happiness. It might be, there are a lot of things. Maybe curiosity makes us do a lot of research. So I have to find out where I'll get the happiness, where I'll get the desire. It is on me to understand what I need in life, where I'll get the happiness. So somewhere I have to search for it. So these are the basic things when we look at why we exist, why should we exist. So one of the commonest things I look when I have everything going against me is maybe make others happy around me. That's the basic thing I look at. So let us be kind, let us be compassionate, let us maybe look at something that gives me knowledge or power. So the nihilism is there. It might be related to the mood state also sometimes. When you're not able to meet our own near and dear people, we're not able to meet our parents. Everywhere we're talking of diseases. So the general state of mood makes us nihilistic. But then there are moments when you're nihilistic, and then we have to search for moments where we can be more positive, and then build on those positives and act on them. So that is how I look at the whole structure. And we are also, as psychiatrists, have our moments of nihilism. So somewhere we search for better meanings in life, put our trust, attention, and focus on those things, build on those things. And basing on research and studies like we've been discussing, let us build the lateral skills. Let us do things which we can do. Things which we can't do anything about, we don't have control. Let us not worry about those things. But there are certain things which we can do. Like suppose we at a time we were not able to see patients, we have looked at ways we can look at patients, like maybe teleconsultation, maybe talking over telephone, maybe a WhatsApp call. So somewhere there is an invention going on. Somewhere we're trying to hone some of our skills. Even Dr. Bhide is taking care of a lot of things so that he hones his skills. So somewhere we have to find some meaning, live those moments, and then maybe wait till tomorrow, because any day tomorrow is going to be a better day than today. That's it.
Amrit, I have a small suggestion. Can you put the flashlight of your phone on your face?
Yes, sir. I'm going to do it now.
Okay.
Vishu,
Okay.
very often
That
people
works,
use the term. Very often people use the term nihilism. What we are really talking about is cynicism, I think, more than nihilism, because nihilism is to deny the existence of anything, where cynicism is a very negative attitude about saying everything is useless. Everybody is motivated with everybody has ulterior motivations. Everybody is evil-minded. I think that's the thing that really undermines. Good to see you. That is the thing that undermines any positivity.
Yeah, there is a related question here, by the way, that I think can also be taken, which is seeing the situation around, I constantly feel guilty of my privilege and any happiness that I feel very guilty and selfish while studying or worrying about things like grades and placements. Any suggestions on how to deal with this? You know, it sort of relates to that, you know.
Like I've seen, we lot of my patients, they're very happy to be sad, and they're sad to be happy. That is one term I use for many people. Like when we don't have things, we are unhappy, and then when we have those things again, we feel unhappy. So somewhere you have to understand that life balances. You get some things, sometimes you don't get many things many of the times. So feeling guilty about some of the privileges, it might be just an internal thing where you have to now I have to tell people that you look at the negatives in life. Like we are accustomed to telling people look at the positives so that in your mind it all balances. Now if somebody is guilty about being happy, getting things in life, then we have to show that there are certain things somebody is not getting. That is how we have to look at it, and then tell them it evens out at the end. It all evens out. You get some things in life which you don't deserve, and you don't get many things in life which you deserve. So it's the whole life is just a balance, and then you have to look at the balances, find them, and maybe be at peace with yourself. That's what I tell people.
I also feel what Sunita said earlier, which is the form of a prayer, which says the courage to change the things I can, and the humility to accept that there are some things I cannot change. I think that's very important. We are preoccupied with social inequalities. They are rampant in our country. And when you come to an institute like yours, where you have a huge range of people from very privileged to totally without any economic well-being, I think so long as you don't practice inequality, that's fine. And when you're in a position to address the inequality, you should be doing it.
So there are two more related questions. So one is a very specific question, which I think could again be taken by Dr. Amrit, which is, and there is a follow-up question. I will read both of them. The one is, does attention deficit disorder require medicines? Can it be cured without medicines? That's one specific question. There is a more general question, which is, how to manage our mental health if we have already been diagnosed before. If a person has OCD, how he or she manages to live with that in closure. Then this person who is saying this has taken medicines in the past to sort of, to address these issues.
Like the first question is, somebody has been diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactive syndrome. So if it is a diagnosis by a trained mental professional, now it has to be a multi-pronged approach in terms of treatment. We need pharmacotherapy. Along with that, we need psychological management in terms of maybe a CBT, parental management training. A lot of therapies are there available. So once you have a diagnosis and once somebody is not manageable, we have to give treatment. And sometimes what happens is during the time of COVID, or when somebody is enclosed to only one small place, sometimes the hyperactivity will manifest even if somebody is not a diagnosed ADHD. So we have to make the diagnosis in terms of maybe two different settings. Like in a small house, two kids are there, they will remain hyperactive. But as long as if it's a diagnosis, if it's a disorder in terms of a diagnosis, we have to treat, and we have to treat till the appropriate time, maybe give drug breaks in between, find out if the patient is improving or maybe maintaining well without drugs, and then gradually taper off. So that requires a lot of observation, and then a lot of follow-ups. Maybe a couple of years, maybe 3 to 4 years is the minimum time we need to treat and maybe get somebody out of ADHD. Maybe some of the aspects of ADHD will be treated in terms of hyperactivity. Maybe as they grow older, the attentional deficits might remain. Some of them might have to remain maybe 10-15 years on medication. So that depends on the patient profile, how he responds to treatment in terms of both pharmacotherapy and psychological management. Now the second part of the question, you talked about OCD. Can you just repeat the question?
So the question was, how does one manage mental health if we already have been diagnosed in the past? If a person has OCD, how does he or she manages to live with that? In closure, I suppose the meaning of the word in closure might be maybe because a person might be in a very small house or a hostel room. That might be the meaning.
So now there are difficult times in terms of reaching out to the doctor, maybe reaching out to mental health professionals. So if somebody has a comorbid, coexisting mental illness, we generally, if somebody is not able to reach to us, maybe via teleconsultation, if we cannot be 100% sure about how the things are, because sometimes it is deceptive when we see somebody in front of the camera, his body language, what he's telling, what he's expressing. Maybe one camera we don't get enough inputs from the family members, but then generally we at this current treatment this time we tell the people to continue with the medications, whatever doses they are in, as long as they are not getting there is no aggravation of the symptoms or there are no serious side effects. So sometimes what is just right, or maybe what he or she has been taking, we tell to continue as long as there are no exacerbations or there are no serious side effects. Coming to OCD, OCD again, because of this, if you look at OCD, one of the commonest symptoms is cleanliness, dirt and contamination, where people are washing hands. And this whole COVID pandemic has made us a little bit of obsessive in terms of people who were never into cleanliness. Like I had never washed my hands before eating in my life. Now I wash it 3 times. So here somewhere you have to give a leeway to what is happening, what the whole situation around us, it is an adaptive process now. Washing hands, cleanliness, contamination, the fear of contamination has become a very adaptive process. So somewhere we have to understand, we have to draw the line, what is acceptable, what is not acceptable. And if somebody is diagnosed with OCD, yes, he or she needs to take treatment. If he's having obsessive thoughts, if there are, repetitions in terms of their compulsive acts. And then closure, I didn't get the point of closure. Closure in terms of the diagnosis and treatment, or closure in terms of being enclosed in a small area. That is what.
Yeah, it wasn't clear to me either. Yeah, even I'm not very clear. Yeah.
Closure means, yes, I have OCD, I have to take treatment for this particular. It is one type of closure. So
I think
anybody else can.
With closure, so it's not very clear what is the meaning. Small area that the person is currently living, or is it closure of the?
Because OCD is that the symptoms are very dynamic. Sometimes they increase on the same dose, sometimes they reduce on the same dose. It is fluctuating. So we have to be a little careful. We have to go for follow-ups and maybe see how it turns out to be.
So Amrit, you're the first case of viral etiology of OCD.
So we have one more question related to family related. I would like to invite Dr. Sunita Simon here. I live in Mumbai with my parents. Majority of my work is in field, so my work from home is not frequent in this lockdown period. This leaves a huge gap, and to frustration, I end up having quarrel with my parents even on small things. I tried and balanced my free time with other work, but same is the case for my parents. They also get frustrated. How to cope with this issue of conflicts with parents? That's the question.
Okay. It sounds to me this person already has a lot of insight. Has already figured out that I'm getting angry over small things unnecessarily. So he's 3/4 the way there, and I think if you're getting angry and irritated for no reason, one simple thing is to try and move yourself physically from that place. I mean, if you're angry and arguing with your parents in one room or you're getting irritable, try and move to the other place and tell yourself that, you know, because usually after 5 minutes or 10 minutes when your anger settles, it's sort of, you know, when we get angry, it kind of peaks and then comes down. And if you don't give in to the whim to verbalize when you're in that anger, then it does help. So go away to another room for some time. And when you calm down, the issue, if it is something really trivial, it does not need to be, you don't need to bring it up. But if it is something that is, you know, irritating and it is an issue, then, you know, when you're not angry, you could try and communicate that. But sometimes it's good to just sit down with parents and say that, like we do for any kind of conflict resolution, to sit down with everyone when you're not angry and see, try and discuss these are the things which make one annoyed, and let us not trigger each other. And if you're definitely giving vent to your anger, move yourself out from there physically, you know, for some time. That helps.
Okay, so there is a, so now there are some issues faced by students, which is a general issue. I think anybody, you know, I would like to request all of you to address this. You know, students are quite stressed since they are more prone to contacting infection in hostels. So it seems like this is written by a student who is currently in the campus and who is in the hostel, and there are not too many of them, by the way, but there are still substantial number of them. The thought that they have to go through quarantine, and more so since after coming out of quarantine, if they get advised to quarantine once again within a short time due to primary or secondary contact who got infected, they get very anxious. How does one help to calm them down, keep them focused and motivated about research? I think, in fact, this might be related to the very recent hostel sealing down that has happened on campus, where some students have had to be on quarantine for a fairly prolonged period of time. Who will take this question? Any of you? It's a very general issue that students are faced with right now. Dr. Bide? Dr. Amrit, any of you, please?
How to handle quarantine?
Yeah. I know, especially repeated quarantines, the stress arising from repeated quarantine.
First, sympathize with yourself and don't berate yourself, don't flog yourself. It's not your fault at all. At the same time, displacing your aggression on authorities, which is a normal reaction for children, and also in your adolescence and early adult years, is something which will naturally happen, but control it up beyond a point. Then sit down and analyze the situation. What is it that is causing me so much frustration? I'm being restricted over here. I cannot step out of my room, or I cannot go beyond this corridor. Within this space, look at things as light-heartedly as possible. Very tough to do, but not impossible. Within this space, what can I do? One thing I repeatedly say is that I'm very glad that the pandemic, if it had to happen, is happening at a time when we have the internet. Because the internet has facilitated so many processes for us, whether they're learning processes and communicating processes and so forth. You can reach out much better than you would before the internet came upon us. Use this time to be introspective and look at what is happening in your life. What are the things that have been going well? Pat yourself on the back. You deserve to do that also for good things that you've done. If there aren't enough good things, again, don't flog yourself, but start working consciously on areas. There could be areas like anger, there could be areas like jealousy, there could be areas like a tendency to be cynical or despondent. Work on those so that you slowly sweep them out of your room and your brain. This does not happen overnight, but with concentrated effort, that can be achieved. Also, quarantine is a period during which your fear about the infection, very naturally, is going to be heightened. Get correct information from competent healthcare people about what is your specific risk and how can you minimize that. Positively act on that. Don't just, people collect a lot of good information, don't put it to good use in different realms of our lives. Over here, you need to practically put what information you've gathered, what health education you have to put to good use. And then, of course, like Naren said quite a while ago, it appealed to me a lot, that remember, this is also a cloud. Every cloud passes. You're not going to be in this situation forever and ever, amen. There is going to be light at the end of the tunnel, even if you can't see it just now.
Muted. Vishu muted.
Oh, thank you very much for alerting about that. So this is, I would like to ask, direct these questions to Dr. Narayan Rao. These relate to work and productivity, but in a very interestingly opposite ways. One student who has already been struggling with a lot of anxiety issues and was beginning to figure out how to manage, he is now struck by this lockdown. Okay, now at home, he has, he doesn't have people who understand his necessity of having a dedicated time for his research work, and at the same time the advisor is expecting that because his work is theoretical, which doesn't require a laboratory, he should be even more productive than the past because there are very few distractions according to the professor. Okay, so this but the at home he's not getting that support that he's asking for. So this has led to a very heightened anxiety and stress, and I do not know how to handle this anymore, and I feel all the more anxious now that I don't know when we will be allowed to come back on campus. If there is anything you can suggest to navigate me this, it will be very helpful. So this is one question, but there's a question that is almost sort of exactly in a opposite confusion here. I'm completely confused about coming back to campus right now. I feel the situation is not safe. However, I feel very guilty and bad asking my professors staying back and postponing my return. So I feel it's unethical and unfair to ask him to extend my, stay away from the work. But at the same time, I'm conflicted because I think it's risk for me to come. So this is the confusion of the second student. So I would like you to take up these issues. Sure. And what's the opinion on how to handle these two situations?
Yeah, very interesting questions. I think it's in general about it borders the same thing like am I using my time in a productive way? Okay, and some people are guilty that they're not using it in productive way. Some people are apprehensive that what will happen if they come back, and if they don't come back, they feel guilty. And I'm not using it at home. Okay, one thing which all the panelists we all have been telling is that it's very important to realize that you need to be kind to yourself. When we say about virtues like kind, compassion towards the others, the same things need to be applied even to yourself. It's very important that you should not be harshly judging yourself. Many times you might have set such high standards to yourself that the situation at present is not something which is conducive to meet those high standards that you have set to yourself. So first thing is you be kind to yourself. And second thing is the current situation or the current working situation, you have to distance away from the current working situation and your love or passion towards science. So if you are not working in the last 2 months, it doesn't mean that you don't like science or you don't like to pursue research. It's just that the environment is not something which is favorable for you to pursue your goals now. Okay. So distance yourself from your long-term goals. Look at some of the short-term measures that you could do. Okay. So that they will be helpful to realize your long-term goals. So it's like if my country is fighting, I can't stop that war. I can't do anything to India-China war. Okay, so what I can do is what I can do near to me. Okay, I can be kind, I can be compassionate to who are next to me. I can have good virtues, I can have good values. Okay, so I think the same principle need to be applied to your research also, that you need to look at your long-term goals. You need to take a step back from those long-term goals, look at short-term measures, so that you don't feel either guilty or you don't feel that you're not using your current crisis to realize those goals. So be kind to yourself, separate yourself from, separate your long-term goals from your short-term values or the virtues that you have. And also realize that as a person, you are more than what you work. Okay, so there are many other facets to your life other than what you are doing in the campus or at home, working from home. So work is part of your life. It cannot be it cannot consume everything out of your life. So there are many other facets other than this. So try to work on them. Maybe earlier your work pressure, or you are so focused on realizing that you might not have given time to rest of the things. So this may be a time to focus on your personal life, because many times not everything is in your control. So like Dr. Smita was telling, so if you can change something, try to change it. But if you cannot change, learn to accept it so that you don't feel guilty about that, and continue to live so that you can realize things. So you can do many things to decrease your anxiety in a short-term measure. Okay, so those are all behavioral things, like you can be mindful, like what Dr. Amrut was suggesting. You can do relaxation. At the same time, you can also do many physical activities which will help you to relax. Maybe you can do yoga, you can do a good physical exercise at home. Okay, but nonetheless, it's very important that it's your mind which is resulting in these anxieties, and unless you change your thinking pattern, these measures are not going to be very effective. So both have to happen simultaneously, that you have to come in terms with your own aspirations in such a way that it is not affecting your own growth. I think that answers at least some of these confusing questions.
There is another question which I request Dr. Bede to take, which is about interpersonal relationships. It's not clear. Some aspects are not clear. This is with regards to how to shield myself from constant criticisms when it is not possible to change the other person and the negativity and put downs continue. How do I manage? What is not clear is it a workplace context or a domestic context is not clear. This is the question that someone has posted. Dr. Bede, you need to unmute, I think.
Yeah, I was saying this is related to the first question I took up, where people have to be facing bombardments of remarks like you're no good. So constant criticism is the style of some people, and I know that a number of people break down in an institution like yours when seniors, faculty particularly, berate a person and write off his or her abilities. That is very damaging and something that needs controlling. There are two strategies over here. One is intrapsychic, where you say that, hello, sticks and stones can break my bones, but names will never hurt me. Now, that's an old adage, but it is rich with meaning that you are not going to allow this criticism to percolate to you if you have adequately evaluated it and found it invalid. First, you must evaluate it. Is there some basis to what he's saying? My boss is telling me, or my guide is telling me, or my teacher is telling me this thing about myself, that you're not performing adequately, you're not measuring up to our expectations. If it is valid, then again, I think introspective analysis is very necessary. Sit down with yourself. If the criticism is invalid, as it sometimes is, then you need to go to the person who is criticizing you repeatedly and say, hello, can we be a little more positive about this? Can you please guide me in practical terms how I might perform better? I want to escape criticism not by running away from it, not by pretending it doesn't exist, but by performing better. Please guide me about how you expect me to perform and how I might be able to. So the standard answer very commonly has been from senior faculty, you're at a postgraduate level, I can't be hand-holding and spoon-feeding you. But some people, especially those who come from less privileged backgrounds, and this is quite common, they develop a sense of social phobia, they withdraw into themselves or overcompensating, they become very aggressive with peers. These are preventable styles, preventable problems that can be handled with a sort of a circle time model where you sit down together and say that, hello, this is what you need to do. This is how you might be able to improve your performance, and we will evaluate you when you put these particular points into practice. This helps a lot. I have managed to intervene in certain aspects with certain faculty in the life sciences section by giving them this advice about please don't handle this student in this fashion, don't be hypercritical, take this up in a more creative way. Usually this kind of advice is accepted by seniors who are hypercritical. Criticism coming from the peer group is more difficult to handle because it becomes, it becomes a very subtle form of bullying that sometimes pervades young people's lives. And that needs a separate kind of handling where I think a faculty member needs to intervene and see that this bullying of an intellectual kind stops.
Hi. So we have, it's 5:25 now. I think we had a fairly long and interesting discussion. So
there is one question over here, which is, there's one question in the
have I missed
chat.
Anything? Yeah.
I just wanted to know how to stick to my schedule. I'm unable to complete my tasks and I'm worried I'm gaining weight.
Okay.
It's the first question that has come in the chat box.
Okay, it's one of the, yeah. So we had a session on time management last time, last couple of weeks ago, right? So yeah, but
that is one question, and Vishu, I'll just complete the other one. I think it should go to Sunita. The second, I mean, this probably should go to Naren. And another question we just said, it has come in two stages. First stage, it only said husband.
Okay, that's one. I think it was a clarification to a previous question.
No, husband, and then he says not willing to talk, or how do I handle?
Okay, this is okay. I have missed some of these things. Okay, yeah. Professor Sunita.
Yeah. So if I've understood the question, because I'm not able to see it in the questionnaire, Q&A, where I've missed that, but
it has come in the chat box. So
on the
Q&A, it has come. First, just it said husband.
And then I saw something bossing. Is that not the same one?
Same one,
okay.
Same one.
Okay, so if it is that the, if I've understood right, the person is not willing for help, then on a very simplistic level, either one has to improve one's coping with this, a situation which is some time apart, and use relaxation techniques and things like that. But if there is some amount of bullying or harassment, just as Dr. Bide was saying about if your teacher or supervisor is bullying you, if your husband is bullying you, or even the wife, I mean, this is sometimes we see men also being bullied by their spouses. It is important to say no, and if you feel that there's a risk of escalation of violence, because sometimes women do tell me that if I start putting my foot down, things are going to worsen. In that case, definitely better to talk to a extended family member and get some additional support, get formal counseling help. But otherwise, in many cases, it does help to choose a good moment and to sit them down and say, this is not okay. This is not acceptable, and you would need to put your foot down, because otherwise the behavior would continue. But from your side, do it respectfully. I don't know whether that answers the full question or not, but anyone else want to take it further?
Good answer.
So there are two other, I think we have pretty much covered all the questions. There are two unanswered questions, I think, right now. As Dr. Bide mentioned, there was something about sticking to schedule. So we did have a time management session a couple of weeks ago, and we will be looking at the recording, and hopefully we'll share it with the entire campus community that has detailed strategies and many questions related to scheduling and time management. Hopefully that question can be answered. There is a very specific question on, I have been diagnosed with complex PTSD and I have been taking medicines for anxiety and depression. I've noticed that when I throw up anything I eat or get acid reflux when I am anxious or stressed, it has increased a lot after being quarantined. Any tips that can help?
Yeah, Amrita, I think should
So he's already a diagnosed case of complex PTSD, and whenever that is what we were asking: repeated quarantine, or maybe facing lockdowns, and then anxiety. When you get extremely anxious, your whole autonomic hyperactivity occurs. You might sweat more, you might go to the washroom more, you might throw up, you might not feel like eating. So somewhere I think the behavioral management is very, very important. You understand that when you are stressed out, what are the signs and symptoms of when you are crossing that threshold where you are not able to control your emotions or thought processes. Maybe go for deep breathing exercises, deep muscular relaxation, and sometimes I tell my patients to keep a SOS medication. We have a lot of mouth dissolving medications. So because in quarantine you don't have access to medical help, you can't access your doctor. So somewhere I tell my patients sometimes to teach them all the techniques where you can relax. And if even though with all using all the techniques you can't get over those things, I give you SOS medications, put it on your tongue, and that moment where you're actually feeling overwhelmed or you're unable, you're not in control of the whole situation or whatever it is, you get that control, and then gradually you feel better. And once you have some armament with which you can control whatever is going to happen, so the anxiety level also reduces, because you know that there is something. Many of the times we are very anxious because we feel that we might not get help, or we might not get medical help, we might not get some emotional help. So somewhere we understand that we process a threshold, I have got something with me which can take care of the things, that relaxes you little more and maybe makes you feel more relieved. So that is how we go about somebody who sometimes gets very, very overwhelmed, even on medications.
Okay, I think we have covered all the questions now. So I would like to request all of you to make concluding remarks on the following broad point, which we hear all the time. So there is a situation of panic and uncertainty, and how should students sort of face this uncertainty in terms of their productivity and career and other life issues. So any broad general comments to conclude the session on this point by all the panelists, please. Can I start with Amrit, who is already on live anyway?
Yeah. Anyway, so what Madam was already telling, except certain things like which we cannot control, like the presence of uncertainty, how long will it take, when will this all end, the accuracy of the statistics, whatever is being thrown at us, other people's action, what my boss told, what my spouse is telling. We sometimes we have to accept those things, and what we can control, acknowledging our own distress. Yes, that we might be distressed. Let us acknowledge those things. They're very, very normal things. It doesn't make us in any sense weaker by accepting certain things. Let us be helpful to others. Let us curb our watching of negative news, spreading of negative news. Let us be compassionate. Let us know how to deal with our own anxieties. Let us understand. Let us focus on the things which we can control. Focus on the internal locus, not on the external locus. We are always searching for validation, what people will tell, what people will think, how I will look to them. So sometimes let us just get out of those shackles. Let us look at practical solutions to our problems. Let us not look at perfect solutions. At this time we will not get perfect solution. Whatever is possible, let us try to do it. Let us do what we can. Let us not worry about things which we can't do anything about. That's all.
Dr. Bide?
I'll come at the end. Let the younger people finish.
Dr. Naren? Can you unmute yourself?
I think the analogy what Dr. Bide gave of the weather is very appropriate. So imagine yourself as a sky. Then there will be some dark clouds. So dark times will come, but after the dark clouds come, the weather will change, and there will be some sunny days also. Okay, so I think we need to learn to live with the uncertainty rather than looking for some definitive answers when there are actually no definitive answers. So you make some room for some bad weather. Learn to live different weathers wearing appropriate clothing so that you cope yourself in such a way that the weather doesn't affect you, so that you can continue to be doing what you are intended to do yourself.
Professor Sunita Simon?
I really wish I could tell you something wise and wonderful that you will make you feel really good. But I think all I would say is that it's absolutely normal to feel a degree of stress at this time. I mean, if you did not feel stress, that is something abnormal and non-adaptive. I mean, some stress is absolutely okay. And what all of you have asked in all your questions is how to manage it. And I think those are things from physical exercise, yoga, which needs to be managed. And whatever you can't do, I think we are going through difficult times, and all of us are doing the best we can. And I think this is a good opportunity for all of us. We've all been emotionally inoculated now, so I think, we will handle, other stresses too. And I think we just have to take it one step at a time and do our best. And it's okay to feel anxious, so long as it doesn't overwhelm us.
Right.
Dr. Bide.
Yeah, I think good answers have been given to your specific question. I ran a small series of lines for difficult times when the pandemic was taking deep roots. And I'd like to take a little light-hearted view of things. Within limits, of course, we have to be light-hearted about these things. So I remembered a little ditty that I had learnt as a child, which said, "Down in the forest where the green bamboo grows, there stood a brown ant on an elephant's toes. Said the elephant to the ant with tears in his eyes, 'Get off, you bully, fight someone of your size.'" So over here we had the situation where the ant, of course, is our virus, and we haven't got a control over it. Massively technologically advanced though we are, we pride ourselves on our intelligence, we pride ourselves on our ability to adapt, but I think it's taking a huge toll on us. And naturally, in these circumstances, like Sunita just mentioned, it will be abnormal not to be anxious. But within that, are you doing the best you can? If you are, please find satisfaction within that. Also learn from examples. I am a great believer in what is called bibliotherapy, that is using media for addressing one's own angst and one's own difficult passages in life. There is a wonderful narration of an actual incident. During the Holocaust, there was a Dutch family that got ensconced in a tiny part of a building. It was like an attic, and they were there. This is the diary of Anne Frank, many of you might be familiar with, and that is available as a movie, where a whole family was locked up for close to 2 years. Eventually they got found out, but there had been non-Jewish helpers of Jews during the Holocaust, and they helped this family to be safe for a long time. The story is that eventually they got caught, and the entire family, except the father, was sent to the gas chambers. The father survived. Many days later, he finds the diary of his daughter, a very telling document, and a very positive outlook even in the face of horrible circumstances. You don't know when death is going to stare you in the face. It may be the next moment, it may be years from now. But this young girl lost her life because she was killed in a gas chamber. That diary is a fantastic document for positivity, and I would urge people to see this movie. It's available on YouTube, The Diary of Anne Frank. I think we can learn from the examples of others about how not to break down in the face of such horrible circumstances. That, of course, was a man-made evil. We don't have any evidence that this has been, whatever Mr. Trump may think about China, we don't have enough evidence to say that this is a man-made evil. Whatever it is a biological mechanism that is upon us, and we have to be bold, we have to be brave, we have to be strong to be able to combat it. Cliched though it may sound, we need to work on our inner systems. Sunita believes that we have been emotionally inoculated, and I endorse that point of view. Even as we wait for actual vaccines, that emotional inoculation should prepare us, if worse comes to worse, to face that situation, but very seldom does worse come to worse. Please, let's remember the recovery rate, it has dropped a little. It used to be 85%, is now about 62.5%, which is not bad. So even if you get it, early detection, getting the right kind of aid, your prognosis is not all that bad. Please keep that in mind, which does not validate any kind of complacency. We have to be alert. We have to be alert for ourselves, and we have to be alert for people around us, and also be very firm with people who don't wear masks, people who don't keep social distancing. Tell them to their face that they need to adopt these simple strategies. That would be my final message.
Thank you, all the panelists, and I now request Professor Anil Kumar, the chair of our committee, to make final concluding remarks. Thanks.
Thank you, Professor Vishwesha, for conducting this session in a very efficient manner. And let me thank Professor Ajit Bide, Professor Sunita Simon, Dr. Amrit Patajoshi and Professor Naren Rao for this wonderful session. It was quite informative, and it is for me it was a personally it was quite useful. I hope that for everybody who is attending this session, this is a very useful event. And this is the second event that Wellness Center during this pandemic has conducted. So this is about managing stress. The first one was about time management. Both these sessions are being recorded, and the recorded link will be available in the Wellness Center website very soon. So those who missed this event can see that recording and then take advantage of this. On behalf of the IISc community and the Wellness Center, I thank all the 4 panelists for this wonderful session. It is quite useful, and the students and the faculty members are really thankful to you for this wonderful session, so informative session. Thank you all. I would request the panelists to stay back and we can close this event. Thank you.